regular Board of Education meeting will be held on Tuesday, July 28th at 7:30 p.m. Thank you, everyone. It's been a busy couple of weeks. I hope everyone got a breather after the budget. We did have an OPC meeting, and unless you're all as riveted as I am, Channel 79, you may not have seen, but I did express to all the heads of other boards how pleased I was with the Board of Education. I know many of us wrestled with a lot of decisions here, but I said it was really the true collaborative nature of the Board of Education, that we made really hard decisions and we came to an outcome for children that we could all move forward with. And so it was much appreciated. And I realized that in doing that, I didn't really get a great chance to thank you all for all of your work over the last many months. For most of us beginning late last December. So thank you all. We have a busy calendar even this summer. I'm sure Dr. Adley will update you, but I continue to sit on the reopening of schools committee. And we are waiting for the governor to give us some more information before we finalize, but I can tell you everyone there has been incredibly dedicated to their time and kind of the norms of the meetings and really focused on what's best for our kids holistically, educationally, social, emotionally, opportunity-wise. So I'm very anxious to hear more from the state because I think our community, rightfully so, has some questions. So we will continue down that pathway. Dr. Adley can supply any more information if he has it. With that, because we have Dr. Levins with us and we have a full calendar, I'm going to kind of stop there. Sure. But we will move forward to public comment. Do we have any public comment this evening? None? Dr. McGettigan, do you have anyone waiting?
See any raised hands? None.
Okay, so we'll offer everyone that opportunity again later, but we'll move on to the superintendent's report.
Good evening, everybody, especially those who are participating from home. Thank you for tuning in this evening. I want to once more time thank the staff, the parents, and the entire community for their support of the ceremony, for the moving up ceremonies for our 5th graders, our 8th graders, and most specifically for our seniors. I think that it's hard to imagine these things until you actually see them, and they were very well received. Our kids had a good time, and it just was nice to see it all come together. So for the staff and for the community members who actually put those things together, we express our appreciation on behalf of the children. I'm saying that we did send out the high school did send out a survey this evening, and the survey was to solicit one more time, because you may recall that on August 26th and I think it was July 26th and August 1st, we held those 2 dates to see if there was any possibility or desire to have something in person. That and or a virtual ceremony. So the high school had surveyed our students before, and didn't appear to have as much interest in those things. But now that this experience is over, sometimes you have to experience something before you get a sense of it. So now this experience is over, they're just going back out again one more time. Is there a desire to participate in any of those things? If there was for the graduation, the maximum for graduation, that the standard at the moment is 250, and there's no sign that may change at this point. So it'll have to be something different. So they're going to get that information back pretty quickly, and we'll see whether we'll do some other activity there. I do think that the general sense that I've been receiving feedback on is that people seem to be happy with kind of what the staff and the community have put on for the kids to this point, but we'll see what they say. The work of the vision of the graduate continues, as does the strategic planning committee, and Dr. Lemons is with the Board of Education this evening. We welcome Dr. Lemons as he's on his way to Virginia, but he's with us tonight to do a little bit of work on some of the guiding documents with the board, and we'll talk about that as we get up and running. Oxridge continues to meet to finalize the design and also meet the budget. Later this month, we'll be going to the State Department of Education with our next phase of the project to get their blessing. The hiring process has been very, very fruitful. We're pleased and excited this evening later on to appoint a middle school assistant principal and a director of music. We have other positions, including school psychologists and so on. We've been seeing fabulous candidates. Very pleased with the candidates that we have seen thus far. The task force, the reopening school task force has been meeting. Its fourth meeting will be this week, and we'll be reporting back out. A report will be developed to share with both the cabinet, myself, and also the board in general. There may be opportunities for other input along the way, but this will complete their work. The main recommendations will come out of their meeting this particular week. I will say that by Thursday morning, we are to receive the guidelines for the return back to school. I can share some context that I found out today. Generally, it will focus around 5 dimensions: hand washing, sanitizing, social distancing, face covering, and cohorting, with the essence of, I believe, all students coming back to school. Now, the devil might be in the detail a little bit, but that gives us a wee bit of a heads up, and we'll get the full report, I believe, on Thursday morning, which will actually be in time to for the committee work later that day. Summer school in the ESY it gets up and running next Monday. Goes through the end of July. Staff orientations will happen this week in terms of getting our staff ready for their students. Right now we have about 330 or so, or just over, students who have registered, and that's compared to about 1,500 last year. There are certain students who are signed up for multiple courses and so on, as might be expected. The most popular courses for summer school tended to be the more formal courses, such as makeup and geometry and algebra and those particular courses. Our families have been provided the ESY schedules, and I believe our students are looking forward to meeting with their teachers and related service providers. A number of curriculum projects took place last week at the elementary level and each of the disciplines, and also the secondary level. Mr. Tremberger coordinated that. For the Board of Education, I would say we will send out a Zoom, or sorry, a survey doodle to see your availability. We'll start with July, Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, and see what people's availability will be, because we'd like to do a retreat with the board. We have some work to do, which might also include some of the work around athletics. So we'll send that out, and hopefully we can hit on a sweet spot, maybe pick one day in January, in July. If we can't do that, we'll regroup and see if another day is available. Again, I just want to wish our parents who are watching a very safe and COVID-free and relaxing summer vacation. As you can tell, one day to the next. Hopefully you've been able to transition in a little bit, but again, thank you to our parents for all of their work down the stretch.
Great. We'll move on to the approval of minutes. It's requested that the board approve the following minutes of the special meeting and executive session held on June 9th, 2020. Can I have a motion to approve? Mr. Sini and Mrs. Stein, so move. All in favor? And that is unanimous, Mrs. Ritchie. And minutes of the regular meeting held on June 9th, 2020. May I have a motion to approve? Mr. Burke and Mr. Maroney, so move. All in favor? And that also is unanimous. Thank you, everybody. We will move on. Are there any board committee reports? Mrs. Ritchie.
Thanks. I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that the Finance Committee met on Friday, June 19th, and the full committee was present. We went over the one transfer that was approved by Dr. Adley, and Rich will have a more detailed report later on in the meeting.
Great. Any other board committee reports? Mr. Deneen?
Yeah, just the next, can you hear me?
Yep.
All right, the next Oxbridge Building Committee meeting is this Thursday, June 25th at 10 a.m. It will be a Zoom meeting. That way we will finalize the design development phase. And then as Dr. Adley said, the meeting at the state level is July 1st at 1 p.m. where we'll be presenting the design development phase And the meeting this Thursday will also go over where we landed with the value management items that we went through in terms of the overall budget.
Great, thank you. Seeing no other hands, we will move on to presentation and discussions. And we are happy to have Dr. Lemons back with us on the strategic plan. Alan, anything to?
Yeah, I just, obviously this is Dr. Lemon's second time back to the board, and we've re-engaged for the last couple of weeks with the strategic planning process. We took a little bit of a hiatus which we once the end of March kicked in, and we stepped out of school, but we're back up and running again with the virtual meetings. I will say tonight, Dr. Lemons is going to come and engage the board in a little bit of thinking process, cognitively get you engaged. That is in a non-threatening way. So don't feel under pressure in any way, but there's a wee opportunity for a wee bit of interactive thinking tonight on behalf of the board. Your thoughts will be visible, but they'll be anonymous, and they will not have to be crafted in any coherent way. So it'll just be ideas and thoughts, raw thoughts, and we'll come back again. Richard will talk about how we're going to use these, but it's also to sort of start to solicit some ideas from the board as to what they would like to see in these guiding documents. We'll be talking tonight about the vision, mission, and values. The board goals is the other part of the guiding document, but for tonight we'll focus on the vision, mission, and core values. But with that, I'll turn it over to Richard. The board members, you should have some links if you, that I sent them again this evening. They should be active. They should be active. We won't know who's writing in them, so that's okay. And again, you don't have to put any coherent paragraphs or sentences together necessarily. So with that, I'll turn it over to Richard.
Good evening. It is an honor to be back with the school district, even if it is through the technology of Zoom. When I was last with you, it was when the world was a different place. I believe it was February 25th, a couple weeks before everything went sideways. I think we were just beginning to hear about the spread of the virus out of China and into other parts of the world. But it wasn't long before things changed. So though I'm not there with you in person, and I am tickled to be with you remotely, and also very proud that the committee wanted to keep the work going, and the superintendent, after a few weeks of just getting the district's bearing and legs underneath itself as it was pivoting to distance learning, said, let's get this going, and we can't afford to not move forward with this. Tonight, I come to you tonight, as the superintendent was saying, to give you an update, but also to solicit input. We promised at the beginning of this journey that there would be opportunities over the course of the work of the committee where we would come back to you and give you updates, but we would also solicit some ideas so that your thinking can contribute to the ultimate strategic plan that is developed. The big ideas that I want your feedback on tonight are around elements that would go into a mission statement, ideas that would go into a vision statement, and you're thinking about the core values that would best represent how you want Darien Public Schools to operate as it's pursuing, as it's working on its mission and pursuing a vision. First, I want to just talk about the process, remind you of what we agreed to several months ago, and the process we've been using, and where we are, especially in terms of the hiatus that we had for several weeks as the district was focusing, as all districts in the state and the nation were focusing on moving to distance learning. You charged myself as a facilitator and the superintendent to guide a process that would take a broadly representative stakeholder group through a number of steps that are designed ultimately to produce a visionary long-term strategic plan that can guide the work of the district next year and for the years ahead. We began that process with a needs assessment, and that needs assessment was took time. We worked on impressions, we used anecdotal information, and then we worked towards more systematic information and tried to pull upon available data sets and information sources to answer questions that the group posed about the current status of Darien Public Schools. We then, this was about where we were on February 25th when I was coming to you and reporting. This was just a week, if my memory is correct, before the superintendent was originally, or maybe it was a week or two, or the superintendent was originally scheduled to come back to you with his entry plan results. And so we had just started to get close to wrapping up an initial needs assessment of the district, and our idea was that we would look at our results to date and bring in the thinking of the superintendent, because the superintendent along the way over the last several months since coming into the district has been having numerous conversations with key stakeholders inside and outside the district. He's talked with numerous students, he's talked with numerous parents, he's talked with numerous educators, and we thought that was essential information as a steering committee to incorporate into our needs assessment. It was also the case that the steering committee wanted some additional data, qualitative data from key voices in the community, especially students, but not just students. So we organized some focus groups and we posed questions about people's experience inside the district or receiving services from the districts. We talked to teachers, we talked to parents, and we talked to students. And we have just now wrapped up weaving those findings together with the initial findings of the needs assessment. And we've just begun a conversation as a steering committee around some of the foundational documents that will help shape the nature of the strategic plan, and hopefully, all things being equal and this working the way we're hoping that it will work, and I have great confidence that will help shape the work of the district for years to come. Mission statement, vision statement, core values, and I have in brackets here in this third box and the portrait of the graduate, because the high school is leading a similar, parallel, and overlapping process with a stakeholder group to develop a portrait of the graduate that can help clarify the skills, the competencies, the dispositions that all Darien Public School seniors will possess by the time they walk across that stage. Hopefully within a few years, they actually will be walking across the stage in the old full way, back in a pre-COVID timeline. Once we lock those in, the next conversation is to begin to talk about what are the goals. So given the needs assessment, given the vision, mission, core values, what are the broad areas of work that this district's going to work on, not just for a given year and not just in narrow ways, but kind of big, bold, and broad goals. Along with those kind of phases of timeline, is this something we can accomplish in 1 year, or is it 3 years? And is it 3 years from now, because it builds upon other work that will begin? And then measures. How will we know if we're making progress on that goal, and how will we be able to monitor and make adjustments? And ultimately, we will get to how do we achieve those strategies in action. And if you can recall back to our original conversations about the process, this is where we're going to lean heavily on your leaders and in the system, your educators in the system who have more kind of technical expertise about best practice, best strategies for pursuing those goals, and we'll lean heavily on that. So let me see if I can advance this. We're right here in this mission, vision, core values. And in terms of the committee, the process that we've used is I have just, in our last meeting, solicited raw ideas from them. We didn't try to reach consensus as a collective group. In fact, the charge that they've given me is to go offline, solicit your ideas, and then come back to them with some draft versions that are where I try to synthesize their thinking. And I think it's an optimal time to solicit your input also. So what the plan is for this evening is to gather raw ideas, not to try to reach consensus around the table in this Zoom-like environment, but in fact, get your individual thinking, get it on the table so that I can bring it into the thinking of the committee and use your thinking to guide early drafts of a mission statement, vision statement, and an articulation of core values, with the idea that we will then bring back draft versions to you for you to edit, for you to revise, for you to tell me whether I captured the essence of what you were going for or whether I missed something and we need to come back and pick it up. So the rhythm of the next part of this conversation is I'm going to give you some broad overview of each of these ideas. We'll go one by one mission. I'll tell you about what a mission should include from my perspective. I'll give you a few examples, some within the field of education, some from outside of the field of education. And then we're going to have a brief opportunity of kind of quiet writing. The screen will come up. You'll be typing into a Google Doc that only you have access to. And just because I couldn't figure out how to give access, the way you have access is you're anonymous editors of the document. So you'll notice you're going to be in a anonymous penguin or something like that. So your actual names won't be attached for good or for bad. That's just the way it will appear. But in the end, I'll have a collection of your best thinking. So I'm going to pause there and see if there are any questions that the board chair would like me to address or the rest of the board would like me to address before we start going through this process.
I don't know if you can see me. I had a quick question, if I might.
Yes.
Richard, do you want Jill and I to participate since we already participated in this exercise, or should we not?
I would appreciate if you would. I know that you've already contributed, but your thinking might have evolved in the last couple of weeks. And I think in the context of being in a board meeting, I think it would benefit us for you to have your board hat on and to contribute equally with the other members.
Okay, and I had one quick follow-up. Sorry, Tara. How are we going to synthesize this data with the current data we have? How do you view the board's perspective on this in our sort of what we've already done?
Great question. I'm going to treat this as a qualitative researcher. What I'm going to do is read carefully, and I'm going to use an actual qualitative research approach where I'm coding like ideas, and I'm going to look for the emergence of patterns and trends for key ideas around mission, key ideas around vision, key ideas around core values. I'll also look for areas of divergence that I think we might have to ultimately resolve. And I'll do that including both of the data sets, the data set with the steering committee and the data set with the board. And I'll be looking for, I'm hoping in an ideal world, we'll have some big overlap across both of those. And I'll come back to you. But if I don't see that overlap, that'll be one of the things I come back to you with. And I'll say, here's how I came up with some draft documents based upon what you said.
Any other board questions? Okay, Dr. Lemons, you'd like to continue?
Fantastic. So I know that all of you know mission statements, vision statements, core values, but it's probably worth, especially if we have a broader audience listening in, to be explicit about the differences, because sometimes mission and vision get confused or grouped together. A mission statement typically articulates the core purpose of the organization. It's your core business. For McDonald's, it might be to sell cheeseburgers, but yours is educational in orientation. And that's really what a mission statement is. Here's our business, here's our objectives, here's our approach, perhaps. It articulates your purpose. It sometimes explains your why you exist as an organization. And it usually is more anchored in the present work. Some people have written mission statements that are tightly connected to the vision, but it tends to be more present, tends to be more practical. They are written in all kinds of forms and fashions. I've seen long ones, I've seen short ones, but on the whole, my sense of the most effective mission statements, they tend to be concise, they tend to be kind of outcome oriented, feasible, attainable. They have some of those qualities to it. But it'd be probably easier if I show you some examples of some. I'm not lifting these up as the end all be all examples. I just want to put some example mission statements in the room. And here are some that are drawn from education, not all from traditional public schools. Teach for America, well-regarded and kind of famous educational nonprofit, their mission, we're growing the movement of leaders who work to ensure that kids growing up in poverty get an excellent education. So they're clearly, they use the word leaders instead of teachers because in the last 10 years, Teach for America really thinks about teachers as leaders. So that's a part of their brand. But clearly they have a bent towards working in areas of poverty and making sure kids who are in these poor communities have access. Delta County Public Schools has this short, pithy one. I thought it was an interesting one and a little different than others. Caring, challenging, learning every student every day. Here's what we're supposed to be. We're supposed to take care of kids. We're supposed to challenge kids. We're supposed to help kids learn. And it has to be every child, and it has to be consistently every day. That's what we do. That's our business. Fairfax County Public Schools, our mission is to inspire and empower students to meet high academic standards, lead ethical lives, and be responsible and innovative global citizens. That's a kind of fuller statement of what they're trying to accomplish. But we can look outside of education. The TED organization, famous for TED Talks, spreading ideas. That's our job, was simply just to get ideas out into the marketplace of ideas. Habitat for Humanity, seeking to put God's love into action. Habitat for Humanity brings people together to build homes, communities, and hope. And then Community Toolbox, another nonprofit, promoting community health and development by connecting people, ideas, and resources. So again, a sound mission statement is going to help Darien Public Schools communicate with your stakeholders, internal and external, about what you see as your core purpose of existing. And so what I'm inviting you into doing at this point is to click through on the first link that was shared with you around mission and choose any row in that table. And for the next 5 minutes, brainstorm things that seem important to you and the stakeholders you represent in terms of a mission statement. And it doesn't have to be complete sentences, does not need to be fully formed ideas. Think of this as a raw first take of your thinking. And I'm going to bring that document on the screen so other people can see it. But I wouldn't spend a lot of time wordsmithing. Just try to get your ideas onto the table. So I'm going to set a timer for 5 minutes and let you go.
Oh, it's working for someone. It's working for someone over there. It's not really working for me though.
Should we read into our screen names on this one?
I think I find those utterly cute. Anonymous rhino, an anonymous alligator, a hyena. My apologies that it doesn't have names associated. It was a byproduct of not having the accounts you use for Google associated with your account. It was just easier to share links.
Okay, Richard, I'm having trouble. How do I get into the document again? Do I just click on it? Or?
You should just be able to click on the link that the superintendent shared with you earlier, and it should take you right into that document.
So I'm going, okay, sorry, thanks.
And then just click into a row and you can just start typing. Do about 2.5 more minutes.
I think we overachieved. We ran out of lines.
I was going to say, Anonymous Campbell keeps stealing my spot.
But this was great process. Thank you for somehow figuring this out to do this this basis.
I've learned from some really gifted facilitators on my team who are whizzes in technology, and we've learned that the ability of typing in a synchronous manner in Google Docs it's a very powerful tool. You can create new kinds of conversations without people even talking to each other, but everybody's getting to process and everybody's getting to put their ideas on the table in a simultaneous manner. So 1 more minute. And obviously we'll keep the link live for a little while so that if something comes to you in the next couple hours, you can feel free to drop in and add anything else. So I would just offer some editorial comments. I see quite a bit of overlap already across many of your contributions to this, and I see overlap with some of the work that the steering committee. I think that there is a real desire, and it's been in the process from the very beginning, for Darien to be in the business of helping students grow into well-rounded citizens, able to conquer and adapt to an rapidly changing world that is transforming right in front of our eyes, but will dramatically, the pace of change will keep going even faster into the future. So I think that there's definitely something to work with here in teasing out some themes and patterns within these and also with the committee. I'm going to switch back to my PowerPoint, and I'm going to start transitioning us towards a vision statement, or at least your contributions to it. So what's a vision statement? If a mission statement is what you do, if it's your core business, what does a vision statement offer to your strategic plan, or just as a statement standing in and of itself? It fundamentally is what you would expect with something that is visionary. It talks about the future. And it often some people write these as statements of what the work would look like if you were, to borrow from a sports metaphor, knocking it out of the park every time. If everything was perfect, you were achieving all your goals, what would be going on? It should inspire. It should, as a second carrot suggests, it encapsulates a team, a dream. It defines your end game. It tells you where you should be. It should lift people up. People should really look at it, read it, internalize it, and say, wow, we stand for something big. This is going to be an exciting journey. And again, it kind of can describe what it would be like if you fully realized your vision for the future and for the students of Darien and for the community of Darien. So here's some examples that we can draw upon to help make these ideas a little clearer. Boone County, a public school district, says, every graduate ready for college, career, life. We might not be there right now as a school system, but that's our idea. We know that every time a child exits our system, they have so many options ahead of them, whether they're pursuing further education, whether they're dropping into a well-earning, sustainable career, but they're also going to be good at life. They're going to have problem-solving skills. They're going to have a broad range of skills and dispositions. To go back to Teach for America, which we showed earlier in terms of its mission, and it won't surprise you given what their mission is. One day, all children in this nation will have the opportunity to attain an excellent education. Notice that Teach for America isn't saying we're the only ones who are going to contribute to that vision. They're just saying that's the ideal state from our point of view, and that's what we're working toward, and we might be part of a bigger puzzle. Fairfax County Public Schools, we prepare all students for a world of the future by giving them a broad spectrum of opportunities to prepare for education and employment beyond high school. All graduates are productive, responsible members of society, capable of competing in the global economy, motivated to pursue learning throughout their lifetime. There's overlapping between what Fairfax County does and what Boone County is trying to articulate, especially because I've known some of the other artifacts that Boone County has produced. Fairfax County went for kind of a heady, more academic sounding, but they really wanted to articulate what does it mean to be ready, college, career, and life, and that was their choice. Boone County wanted something that was a little sharper, easier to hold on to, a little bit more of a tagline. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. You need to read yourselves in terms of what matters most to you, and also think about what's going to enable your community to embrace it and move forward. Outside of education, the organization Truth Initiatives, which was trying to get information out into the world about the risks of tobacco. We want a future where tobacco is a thing of the past. Habitat for Humanity, a world where everyone has a decent place to live. Again, Habitat for Humanity is not saying we're the only strategy for getting there. We only own a little small piece of it. Maybe it's 30 homes a year in a region, but that's our part of getting to that world. And then the Special Olympics transform communities by inspiring people throughout the world to open their minds, accept and include people with intellectual disabilities, and therefore anyone who's perceived as different. So now I'm inviting you to think about what of substance and content are you interested having show up in a vision statement for Darien Public Schools. And I invite you for the next 5 minutes to click through on the link for vision, and I'll bring that document up. And just, again, don't worry about complete sentences. Don't worry about being perfectly polished. Just try to get down your thoughts, even if they're single words or bullets.
I give it up.
Maybe 2 more minutes. My apologies to the members of the community that are joining in. It's hard to get all this on one page so that you can see it through Zoom simultaneously. So I've just been scrolling up and down occasionally so that you can get a sense of the virtual conversation that is happening on the Google document. And as we start to bring this first part of the conversation to a close, this your brainstorming about vision, I would just like to comment that I'm seeing a lot here that is inspiring to me. And the superintendent will, I'm sure, can attest to the fact that I had been called an edu nerd many times in my life, and this stuff gets me excited. But I also think you have some rather compelling ideas here, what you want for kids, what you want for your community, what you want for the school district, that has a lot of heart in it, and it has a lot of brain in it in terms of what you know students are going to face. So I think that there's really compelling words and phrases and ideas that are going to help create some draft documents that will propel this work forward. I'm going to now pivot back to the PowerPoint. And now core values. I'm a big fan of a strategic plan, including a well thought out, well reasoned, and internalized set of core values. Quite honestly, I'm willing sometimes to give up other pieces, because I think when you're in a human enterprise, such as education, where you're asking one group of humans to develop another group of humans for a human enterprise post-graduation, that is in and of itself a values-laden enterprise, and that it helps people to be in an organization that have come to wrestle with who do you want to be as a group, not just what do you want to achieve, but how do you want to go about achieving it? What's beyond your parameters? What is off limits? What's a third rail? But also how do you want to pursue it in a way that's good, if I dare say that? So core values, deeply held convictions, priorities, underlying assumptions that influence your attitudes and behaviors. And hopefully you want these to take over your organization. You don't want them just to be something that are on a sheet of paper. You want to grow these, you want to develop these, you want these to be how you do business on a day-to-day. You want these to become part of your DNA. They help explain who you are as an organization, how you want to operate. They tend to, along with your core values and mission statement, that's why I'm coming to you for all three of these, create a foundation for your strategic plan. They also inform and constrain. 5, 6, 7 years ago, we heard about a handful of very high-profile districts across the United States get caught in trying to raise achievement for children, but doing it in less than scrupulous ways. Well, your core values help tell you whether a strategy is okay to do, or maybe this is okay for us to do, because achievement's all that really matters. But if you have an articulation of core values that speak to how you want to pursue it and have some gut, some heart in them, that sometimes they'll create that third rail and say, no, we don't do, that's not how we do business in this district. So it puts those guardrails on your plan. So let's look at a few examples. These are longer, typically. They tend to be a collection of core values. So I won't read all of these to you. Here's a district that I have studied and read about quite a bit over the last 15 years, Long Beach on the West Coast. And this is their articulation. And notice that some of these are about They're core values about beliefs, but some of them are core values of beliefs about how we get improvement to work. So they fundamentally believe in the success of all students. They believe in high expectations. They believe in respect and integrity. But notice here, they also believe we got to work together to solve these problems, that we're going to have to be teams as we do this, or we can't really educate all kids to high levels for our future world. They believe in safety. They believe in effectiveness and efficiency. They believe in a constant continuous improvement. So it is not uncommon for articulations of core values to have some of the ethics part of their core values listed, but also some of their fundamental assumptions about the improvement process articulated also. It's not always that way, but it does happen. How about outside of education? Starbucks, with our partners, our coffee, and our customer at our core, we live these values. Culture of warmth and belonging, acting with courage, challenging the status quo, being present, connected, delivering our very best in all we do. We're performance driven through a lens of humanity. And I know that there is a lot that has been written in terms of what happened a couple of years ago at Starbucks, where some patrons were basically asked to leave in the presence of police, and it shuttered. Starbucks shut down the entire enterprise. And there was a lot of conversation, and I have no doubt, I don't have any stock in Starbucks. I don't work with Starbucks as an organization. I have no doubt that there was some PR involved in that. But I also know that some of the conversations that have been documented were really about what happened in that very public way was a violation of their articulated core values. And such a violation, we create a culture of warmth and belonging where everyone's welcome. Well, what happened that day was such a violation. Starbucks thought it was so important that we're going to shut down every single store in America and do training to make sure it never happened again. So it's just an example, since we were using Starbucks, of how core values can be useful. Amazon's is a very different kind of list, like really short, pithy phrases: customer obsession, ownership, invent and simplify, learn and be curious, hire the best, highest standards. So short, pithy, here's how we get the work done. So a lot of theirs are orientations to business. No, that probably doesn't fit Darien Public Schools and most educational organizations, but it gives you a sense of different ways you can go at core values, a more local, at least regional now, Aetna, integrity, excellence, caring, inspiration. 4 big core values with one word tags, but full sentence explanations. But I'm less interested in Aetna than in about Darien Public Schools, obviously. So I'm going to invite you one last time to click through to the 3rd link, which should take you into the core values. And again, I ask you just to get your thoughts down. Don't worry about getting it perfect. Don't worry about if you're feeling like dropping bullets in instead of sentences. All of this work, it all becomes fodder to help create some drafts along with the information that the steering committee has already contributed. couple more minutes. So I would, as we're coming out of collecting your thoughts for core values, one of the things that I find compelling about core values, and it doesn't surprise me at all that yours fit these requirements, is that they become a source of inspiration also. When they're bold, when they have character, and when they have guts, they become something to aspire to. And I can say that, you know, for example, this is my own personal and professional life. I find myself thinking about myself as having a vision, having a mission, that it's often those sense of what are my values that often challenge me and make me want to aspire to be a better person, be a better educator, better father, better partner. And so I think that there's a lot of, you've given some really compelling ideas, as has the steering committee. And I think that these core values can become an important part of your definition of who you are as an educational community, but more than something that can challenge all members of the community to do more and live up to that value. And in some ways it can become its own curriculum, and a curriculum for the students, but also a curriculum for the adults. What does it mean for us to work with integrity on behalf of kids, for example? So I'm going to bring us back to...
Richard, can I just mention that I find those values most helpful when they're perceived as the collective commitments we make with each other in doing the work, and what we believe in doing the work, and how we're going to behave and act in doing the work. And I want to reassure board members, if I can, that this may seem like a well, I don't know what you would think about the activity tonight, but once we get these documents, once they reside in the hearts and minds of people, then they become living documents. And so I just want to reassure people of once things are polished up, and it'll actually drive the work. Anyway.
And I appreciate you underscoring that, because just words on paper, even if they're flowery and compelling for those who wrote them, doesn't mean that they will drive the behavior of others. And I think what you're hoping will happen, and I think this was your thought, Superintendent, was that the whole plan, but these parts also become internalized over time by all of the members of the community, and the core values especially. They become expressions of commitments of how we want to be with each other. So next steps for us, the superintendent, assistant superintendent, and I are trying to figure out some additional meetings over the summer when the steering committee's available, because we don't really want to it's tough sometimes to have the work go over the summer, but we lost so much time because of the initial shutdown. We're trying to keep the momentum going, and we feel like we've got some forward momentum. When we get those locked in, one of the next steps will be for me to come back to the steering committee and say, here's what I heard from the board, here's what I've heard from you, and here's some drafts that I put together based upon patterns and trends I saw and your thoughts. What do you think about them? Kick the tires, or what's jumping out, what's compelling, and that probably will be just the first phase of some rewriting, and we'll do the same for you. We'll bring those back to you, and then we're going to start moving the conversation into goals, timelines, measures based upon the needs assessment and based upon the mission, vision, core values that have been articulated. And that will become a meta framework for holding the strategic plan. And then after that, there'll be work to then kind of double click on those goals. Well, if we say we want to accomplish X, what are the strategies for getting us to X? And what are the actual actions that we need to take? And where do those reside within the organizations? Who's responsible for those? And that kind of really technical stuff sometimes doesn't even go in the plan, but that, I know that's part of the superintendent's ultimate idea, to get this to a place where it is trickling through and out into the organization in powerful ways. But it'll all come out of the broad goals that you and the steering committee help create, revise, and ultimately adopt at some process in this process. We definitely lost some weeks, but I want you to know, and I've told the superintendent this multiple times, the center and myself personally, we're in this for the long haul. We're going to do whatever it takes on our side to get you to across the finish line and having not just a plan, but a powerful plan that represents the best thinking of the board, the superintendent, and the steering committee. We're going to work closely with the superintendent to finalize the timeline of getting there, but we're trying to move as quickly as we possibly can without disengaging the people who've been working hard for the last several months to be a part of the process, the members of the steering committee especially. So I'll hand it back to the board chair, see if there are any questions. I know you have a busy slate of work, but I'm available if you have any more questions.
No, thank you. I think the board has been eager to really dig into the strategic planning, and tonight was a good beginning for that. Any board questions or comments? Mr. Burke.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. It's really nice to be able to read what my colleagues' thoughts are about vision and mission, because we don't really get a chance in our regular meetings to engage that in that kind of fashion. So thank you for the opportunity, and I hope there's a way to save this kind of raw work product, because at some point I would love to go back and read what all of our comments were tonight, even if I don't know who said what, but I would love to just have that.
I'll make sure that we do that this version stays as is, and that we can have it available as an artifact of the process. We actually have multiple of these kinds of artifacts where people were sharing their rawest thinking with the steering committee. So we have multiple documents that are really compelling kind of histories of the evolution of thinking in the process.
Great. Mr. McCammon.
Hi, Richard. Thank you for the exercise again. My question has to do with what you are doing, not so much for Darien, but in the aggregate, how you're thinking about the impact of quarantining and COVID-19 on timelines and content for strategic plans.
So a good question. I think what was, just to be very honest, as an executive director of a nonprofit who works with K-12 institutions primarily, and whose business plan operates almost exclusively on fee-for-service work, I was really nervous after Friday the 13th in March. Like, what's going to happen? And are schools going to ever have the bandwidth to turn back to this longer range work? And I was pleasantly surprised, not just by Darien, but by the entire state, and even outside of the state where I do other work, of how many leaders were saying, I know this is hard right now. We're trying to pivot. We're trying to learn new skills. We're trying to teach people new technologies. We're trying to take care of entire communities sometimes. And we have to look beyond these 2 or 3 months. So this doesn't fully answer your question, but I think that my sense is lots of people are starting to lift their heads up, and they're starting to get a sense of what the next year, 2, 3 might mean. And it is clear for and many strategic planning processes, every strategic planning process that I was a part of on March 13th has already kickstarted and is moving forward just like yours is. Usually a few weeks behind what we thought on the end time, but we're going to get there because we lost that month or month and a half district by district. But what's becoming clear is if, for example, we started the process with steering committee doing a SWOT analysis. If we had done the SWOT analysis at any time after March 13th, the content in that SWOT analysis would be dramatically different because we would have been thinking about the opportunities, the threats, the strengths and weaknesses for responding to this new world order of trying to figure out blended, distance, hybrid learning. I say that by way of, I think that some of our next conversations are going to have to take stock of some of the lessons learned we've had over the last several weeks and have us think about issues of teaching and learning. I will say that Darien's is a part of a network of districts that are working with the center simultaneously on thinking about reopening. So they've been a part of that ongoing workshop. How do we think about mining the lessons learned? How do we think about teaching and learning? How do we think about wellness? How do we think about operations and systems? And this is long, hopefully not long now before we get some more direction from the state, if in fact we get that on Thursday, which we hope to. So I know that Darien, with your leaders here in the room, your central office leaders, have been thinking about those issues also. But I do think this is it's a dynamic, fluid time. People trying to figure out, this is not a static future, and we've thrown a big roadblock into the middle of it. So I think our future conversations for the rest of the summer, as we finalize mission, vision, core values, as we think about broad goal areas, ought to incorporate conversations about what did we learn over the last 3 months about teaching and learning, about the needs of our kids, about the needs of our families, about the needs of our community, the needs of our educators.
Any other board questions? Mrs. McCammon.
Yeah, just can I add on? Thank you, first of all, Richard, for that. I appreciate the perspective very much. So the one component of, I think, this period of time is harvesting lessons learned, but the other component is how we're thinking about implementation timelines in an environment with timelines that are very difficult to predict. So I know we talked about this in the beginning, strategic plans by definition should be dynamic and responsive, but can you give us a little preview into how you're thinking about going into a period of time that's even more dynamic than usual?
So what I would say relative to Darien is I will actually be taking the cues from you instead of giving the cues on this. Districts are responding in very different ways. For example, there's another district right now that is on a similar timeline as yours in the completion of the strategic plan. They're about a month ahead. We started a little bit earlier, and the superintendent in that district has told their steering committee and their administrative body, frankly, that their ambitions for what they're going to accomplish in years 1 and 2 of their strategic plan are they're way exaggerated. She's telling them that because of the dynamic nature of what next year will look like, the fact that we won't have a vaccine, the fact that we're likely going to have some period of time next year where some body of kids, and perhaps if the virus gets worse, all kids are back at home for a considerable amount of time, that because of all those possibilities, that maybe next year you're not accomplishing as much as you would have in year 1 as you would have been thinking 3 months ago. So I think that is happening in a number of places where people are saying, let's just be honest about what we can take on in the first year or 2. And I also think that the districts that are going to be really smart about this, and not, again, to stroke his ego, I know the superintendent has been thinking about this, that it's not about the creation of the plan, it's about the routines and the system you put in place to keep paying attention to the plan and to keep learning from the plan and to keep tailoring the plan. And so I think that I have the utmost confidence that Darien's going to get to a place where you have a plan but you're also going to have a dynamic relationship with it where on a regular basis you're saying, what have we learned in the last 3 months relative to what we said we're going to accomplish? And do we need to tweak? Do we need to adjust? Do we need to speed up we need to put the throttle down because we can accomplish more than we thought we could, or do we need to pull back a little bit? And I think because we know so little, that we're going to have to take that kind of, our best conjecture, our best hypothesis, let's start moving forward, but then continually gather evidence about timeline, how much the organization can handle, how much your students can handle, how much your adults can handle, how much your community can handle, and figure out whether to speed up or whether to slow down. And I think those might be real-time adjustments that happen next year and the following academic year, as most people in the United States are thinking of those as kind of transitional years in this really dynamic, unprecedented time that we're in.
Any other board questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Dr. Lemons. Wish you safe travels tonight. I know you're on the road.
Thank you
for this. We certainly are in a dynamic moment, and I know if Darien does anything well, it certainly does education well. So we will continue to appreciate your guidance and thoughts, the work of the steering committee, and everyone who has given up time in this, for this project, and then in this moment. And as a board, I know we are eager to continue and very willing to adjust in real time should we need to. But thank you.
No doubt. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Richard. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we will move on to the annual progress report on the 2019-2020 district goals and objectives. As we've done in the past, we'll take it by subject area. And if you have a question on that update, please let me know. So any questions on the Board of Education and Superintendent of Schools report with the June update? Feel free to speak up with the screen sharing. I can't see all of you. So if you have a question, feel free to speak up.
Yeah, I'm not really going to speak to this because it's sort of self-explanatory. Yep. If that's okay.
We'll move on to curriculum and instruction. Any questions? I had one question, which is a follow-up from Mrs. Sommer's report and her phases of approaches for the future. At some point, can we see, and it actually speaks exactly to what Mrs. McCammon was just talking about, given our new nature, maybe once we have reopening plans, understanding a timeline for those phases would be helpful. I don't need that tonight, but maybe once we figure out what school's going to look like, we can create that timeline. Any other questions on curriculum and instruction? All right. We will move forward to, sorry, I'm gonna keep going, business. Any questions on the business? I know Rich has updated us on much of this. Seeing none, thank you everyone for doing your work. Special education. Any questions? Okay, and human resources. Seeing that, I'm going to keep moving. Facilities. Mrs. McCammon. Jill, you're on mute.
Where are we on the plan, the architects that we had hired to come and assess our portables and possibly the reimagined libraries?
Chris, do you want to just speak to what you have in your report there?
Yep. So he's continued a lot of the work remotely. We actually just had a meeting last week with John Scheib of Northeast Collaborative. So he's done a lot.
Oh, Rich, we lost you.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Rich? I sort of
Not well.
Try that again.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
Okay. So we actually just recently had a meeting with Northeast Collaborative, Mike Lynch and myself. So he's continued with some of the just kind of like the investigation work. He's had meetings with the principals of the 3 schools that have the portables. He's also met with the library media specialist to kind of get input on that, and he's at the moment trying to put together options for consideration. So it's been moving along. We did lose some time because he did have to come to the building, so we lost a little bit of time, but he was able to do that in May. But it is progressing.
So I'm sorry, so Rich, I'm just looking at the update. So under goal, identify a permanent solution for the school district storage needs. Should we maybe expand upon that? Just, I'm seeing, okay. Or what am I looking at? Is that looks, I think that's Ox Ridge, right? So underneath the, should we just update the June update so that it speaks to those things you just mentioned?
Well, the storage would be a separate issue from the libraries and the portables.
Oh, okay.
So the storage was
okay, that's true. That's right. But is there somewhere that we can put that on there? That update that you just gave? Or I guess it wasn't part of the goals and objectives, but it would be good if we could see that on the document.
Sure.
I don't see it.
So I think that was part of the discussion of the portables as a kind of a new goal we introduced. And that's probably why you don't see it there. And that will be part of our goals and objectives when we move into the summer and we set those goals and objectives, because we introduced it mid-year. So that'll definitely, a full update on that will be necessary at that July meeting, because it was not originally a goal at the school year.
Right, okay. Thanks.
Any other questions? All right, we'll move on to technology. Rich, sorry, who's handling technology?
Christopher.
Christopher. Mr. Tramberg, under the goal of create a technology professional learning plan for faculty and administrators, we had no idea how dynamic and necessary that would be. So is there anything specific or unique you want to speak to in this June update?
I would say that there are a couple of things to point out. The big one is there was certainly a plan to increase professional development offerings for teachers. But just to give you a number, from the time of school closure to the end of the year, there were 600 individual sessions offered between Dr. McGettigan and members of the library media staff. And sometimes those were one-on-one and sometimes those went to small groups. But I think I mentioned at my first or second meeting, we accomplished 5 years of technology professional development in 3 months. And I don't think that's an understatement. So certainly proud of not only the professional development, but there's also a great archive of that work as well, because now we have a tech web page where there's a daily newsletter called Tech at 2 that captures any of the new learning that is coming up from varied resources. And we also added some important things like shout outs to teachers, because this was a big time of teachers helping teachers, and we wanted to recognize whenever that was happening across the district. So we learned a lot. We also got a lot of free resources and software. So there was a great business strategy that a lot of our technology companies offered. And now as we're transitioning into the next year, it's not free anymore. So we are figuring out what we want to keep, how are we going to prioritize, and are those priorities different if we have a traditional return to school, some type of a hybrid, or distance learning. So those are just all things to just keep in mind as we're making our plans for the reopening of school. And just big shout outs and celebrations for how much we did accomplish with technology, and what's coming from our task force now, just as a preview. Now that teachers know how to use the technology, physically how to use it, the next question is, how do you really use it to enhance instruction, provide students with feedback, and collect data? So we're ready to take it to the next level for sure.
So Chris, that speaks a little to my follow-up there, given that we pushed out so much kind of tech ed because we needed to, and a great thank you to our staff for being able to do that and our teachers for really willing to receive that. It was a steep learning curve. And I imagine as we go forward, if this goal is to continue, which I would tell you I'm inclined to support it continuing, would we be coming up with reinforcement plans to someone who had to learn very quickly in a short amount of time, just might need support going forward?
I would say yes to that. And from what I'm gathering and from the survey, the initial survey data we have from the teachers is they would actually like it. So it's something we want to, an area where we want to grow for sure.
Anyone else? Questions on technology? Mr. Brown.
Hey, Chris, real quickly, two things. One is the links you have. Is there any way those could be sent out? I can't seem to get into them. That would be appreciated.
Oh, absolutely.
Or actually, one of them, two of them don't. But and just the other thing is the alignment and fidelity. If we get more information on that moving forward, and again, I know you guys have done a terrific job given the circumstances, and it's probably not top of mind right now. But when appropriate, I'd like to hear more how we're actually integrating the use of technology into meeting some of the overall goals we had pre-technology and continue to develop ongoing.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, community.
I'll say that there's just generally, you can never do enough of the communication. I do think that some of the feedback we received, even through my entry plan, was can we simplify it some way and have more of it, but also simplify it. You can see what we wrote down there in terms of where some of these things are coming from, but I still think that there's work to be done on that. Okay. In this goal.
So I think as a board, we always appreciate good, clear communication. Yeah. Certainly, we've done that. If we can improve upon that, that's great, because oftentimes parents come to the board, and I think on some of it, we help the community remind what we know and what we don't know. So the more communication, the better, but probably not inundating. Finding effective pathways is probably the most useful way. So I'm encouraged to see the survey. Anyone else?
Dr. Adley.
Oh, Duke, sorry, go ahead. I just can't see you.
Sorry. No, just, I mean, I think a big thank you to all those involved in everything that went on to make the graduation as special as can be in this difficult time. And I know you did a survey, and there's folks on this call that had kids graduate, but just, I think, take some time to, from a community standpoint, understand the feedback from the community. The feedback I got from various people throughout the district, parents, teachers, other folks, was very positive around the energy and everything that was done. And they want to take that and rethink what graduation should look like, and not necessarily the traditional, everyone in a stadium and speeches and stuff like that. So I think there's a lot of good learnings that have come out of that, that created, I think, an energy that really excited folks around graduation and what more we could be doing around graduation.
Thank you. I think there are going to be a few more traditions, new traditions.
Yeah. Well, we could decide whether it's a board goal and objective, or we'll definitely look forward to an update on more festivities, maybe. All right, any questions, Mrs. McCammon?
It's been mentioned. I just want to say it again in the spirit of just highlighting communication and the importance of it, and that your board really supports it. So thank you for developing that survey in post e-learning, and thank you that you thought a lot about communication, in addition, of course, to your thoughts about curriculum and delivery. So, again, it's the kind of work we're excited as a board to see. So I just wanted to say that out loud. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions on June's update? Okay, we will move forward to further discussion and possible action on the 2021-2022 school calendar. I think Dr. Adley. Yep, we're there, right? Oh, no, I'm sorry. We're on
Finance Committee.
2019-2020 finance report and possible action on budget transfers. I skipped over Rich and Deb's highlights. So, Mr. Rudel.
Sure, I'll just share my screen real quick. So this is the financial report through May. We are forecasting a year-end balance of $527,384, or 0.53%. The general education RCs currently forecast a surplus of $517,269, and the special education RCs currently forecast a surplus of $10,115. Salaries make up a positive forecast of $736,000. We have $200,000 of salary savings, substitutes of savings of $162,000. Budget control remains untouched at $263,000. Student interns again at $10,200. Athletics $58,347. Overtime $7,338, and then homebound tutoring a little over $31,000. Moving to the operating section, a cumulative positive forecast of $544,895. Those various operating accounts, whether it's teaching supplies, consumables, repairs, things like that, across all RCs, $375,000 of savings. Facility services, which is primarily the contracted cleaning company, and then the trash removal contract, $69,000. Sports officials, $48,000. Transportation, a little over $140,000. Legal fees, $30,000. We are highlighting the pre-purchase of textbooks and uniforms that the board approved, which is a deficit of $210,500. Special education consulting services, a positive $39,000, and then special education tuition of a little over $52,000. Moving to fixed, we do have a positive variance of $289,883. Again, this is transportation for a little over $24,000, insurance for $170,000, payroll taxes projected at a slight deficit of $11,941, and that again is the reclassification of food service workers. Worker compensation, positive $1,100, and then utilities, a little over $106,000. Equipment, we do have a negative variance of $204,000. That is the pre-purchase of iPads and routers. That was approved as part of the budget process for $205,250, and then various equipment savings of just over $1,200. Revenue is a negative forecast of $840,111. Excess cost, we did receive less than budget of $284,000. Field and building rentals due to the closure, a loss of revenue of a little over $87,000. Summer school, $428,000. ELP tuition, $46,000, and then a positive variance in Medicaid reimbursement for $6,600. We did add a slide breaking down the Darien Summer School revenue change. So we are recommending a change in how we record the revenue for summer school. So we're using last year's summer school as an example, as that was the last full year summer school. So that summer school actually collected $742,000. Historically, what's happened is about 75% of that revenue is booked in the old fiscal year. 25% of that revenue is booked in the current fiscal year. So in this case, 2019 Darien Summer School, $196,000 was recorded this current year, and $545,000 was recorded in the previous year, even though 80% of that summer school program occurred in this fiscal year. So what we're recommending is to record the revenue as a prepaid revenue, and then the expenses as a prepaid expense, and then release that into the appropriate budget year going forward. We also added a slide for the average return, which was a request at the Finance Committee. So the 3-year average return has been about $519,000 to the town of Darien. If you include the forecast for this fiscal year of $527,000, the average return would be $521,573. So we're really right around that 3-year average of the expected return. There was one transfer approved by the superintendent. That was for $12,650 for network memory upgrade. The money did come from 3 accounts: Wide Area Network, CEN, which is our internet provider, was just less than budget. Staff development, because of the closure, we didn't have any conferences or trainings that we normally would have came. So that resulted in some savings. And then our tier 3 vendor changed, so we had some savings there as well.
Any board questions, or Mrs. Ritchie, would you like to add anything?
No, I just want to thank Rich for updating that information that was requested at Finance Committee. It's very helpful. And again, thank you so much for your detailed monthly report. Appreciate your work.
Any board questions? Seeing none. Thank you to the Finance Committee. I was able to see most of that meeting. You all did a very nice job in there, and to Mr. Rudel for your reports. And seeing no questions, we'll move forward. We will move on this time truly to further discussion and possible action on the 2021-2022 school calendar. Dr. Adley.
So the board may have just earlier on this evening received an update on the calendar. The calendar reflects the long weekend, so to speak, for professional development that was made at the last board meeting. That was, I believe, on the 14th of January, to coincide with the 17th of January. And no matter how many times we checked this, and no matter how many times we got someone to prove it, we did have to make one change because we miscounted the days in February. It said 14, but there weren't 14, so we pushed back the June date. It used to be, the last one that the board saw was 10 and 13, it's now 13 and 14.
So school would end on the 13th and teacher work day on the 14th.
I will say that at some later date we can come back to some discussions, because there's some verbiage on the bottom of this that the new graduation standards sort of supersede this, and so we can visit that.
So the exciting part for the board is, whereas we used to have to wait until very late in the spring to set graduation, we may, under the new statutes, be able to set graduation much earlier, thus giving parents more notice, more time. And so as soon as we get all those details worked out, we'll come back to the board and hopefully be able to set a graduation date without all the emails we tend to get late spring with people asking us, have we set a graduation date? So if we can do that earlier, we will bring that back to the board for their consideration. Any questions? This calendar is up for possible action tonight. Okay, so with that, can I entertain a motion to approve a school calendar for the year? We approve the 2021-2022 school calendar. Mrs. Stein so moves, Mr. Burke seconds, all in favor. And that is unanimous, Mrs. Ritchie. And me, I didn't say that. That carries unanimously. The annual report on donations, Mr. Rudel, I think you all received that email today.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yep, and that would be right.
Yep, I have it right here. Yep. Mr. Rudel?
Yep, I'll just bring that up right now.
So this process for me is the first time through it. So I'm interested in what is of interest to board members. So anyway, I think it's fairly self-explanatory in some ways, but I'll be curious as to what questions the board would have. Richard, go ahead there. Yeah, okay.
So we had a donation from various parents ranging from $20 to $2,600 for high school athletics. That was in total for $25,890. The Blue Wave Booster Club did donate $910 for freshman football filming. The Blue Wave Booster Club also donated in December a little over $10,000, $10,890 for various athletic items. In November, the Royal PTO donated $2,175.50 for a Gaga pit. In December, the Hindley PTO donated $682.79 for a rug for the library for students. And then in January, There was a donation to the music department for a full-size cello for $900. All told, the donations were $41,448.54.
Board questions or comments?
I have a question. It's Katie. Rich, where are the donations from the boys lacrosse fundraiser this spring?
I don't think that's actually listed. I don't think we had that.
They ended up doing a virtual fundraiser online.
I don't know if you, oh, go ahead.
No, the overall goal, I think, is typically just so the board's aware of the money coming into the district. So
I know there may have been confusion because the actual in-person fundraiser was canceled, but it was done online.
Okay.
And then I know we've had discussions in the past, and I don't know how the board feels about this, but I do think I remain convinced that if what we're really trying to do is see the amount of money coming to the district, we should have the PTOs and their field trip contributions on this list. I know we've gone back and forth with that as a board, but I do think that's significant parent contributions that come into the district, and just so we're aware of, you know, the generosity of our parents, quite frankly, and also kind of what we're asking parents to supplement. I think it's probably a good idea.
Just in going through this exercise, there was also apparent that just in some accounting processes for tracking gifts under 500, we need to just sort of simplify that because gifts over that come to the board, gifts under it don't, and they're in various accounts, so we want to make sure that that's easily recorded. That was one of the takeaways for me when we were doing this.
Deb.
Yeah, so I just wanted to follow. Some of these we've already seen because I think once it goes above that threshold, the board does need to approve those items. So there might be some things that have come through, but because they haven't met that threshold, we haven't seen them because they don't require board approval. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Yes, I think that's pretty typical in a school year. It's just those, what we're trying to distract those large donations. One, so we can say thank you, and two, I think it helps inform kind of our budgeting process. Just knowing where money is flowing. Any other questions? Mr. Burke.
Not a question, just a comment. The comment is thank you to the incredibly generous parents in our district who are so supportive. So thank you to them.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. All right, Mr. Cini.
Just to clarify, this goes in that student activities account?
Correct.
Have you, do we have a balance to that account, Rich?
We haven't closed them out, but it varies depending on the school. So obviously the high school being much bigger has a much bigger balance than say the middle school and the elementary school.
Okay, because that came up in the, I guess, the budget discussion. Is there a way that you guys can accumulate that and maybe give it to us at a future date?
Sure.
Yeah, Mr. Cini is hitting on my favorite topic of conversation. I would agree very much. I think kind of an understanding of those accounts and accounting to the board would be helpful, and that's probably something that I think should be probably discussed either in goals and objectives or our retreat. So I would agree that's a good segue to the summer, John. Mrs. Ritchie.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on that. I thought we had in the past talked about doing a deeper dive into those accounts, those activity fund accounts. So I think instead of getting it piecemeal, maybe that's a larger board discussion rather than having things just trickle in. I think it should be part of a bigger board discussion on that item.
Any other questions on the donation list? Great. We will thank you for that report, and we will move on to discussion and possible action on the proposed athletic field trips. Mr. Manfredoni, are you with us?
I am.
I just wanted to welcome Chris, thank you for the work, but also to say to the board, this might seem unusual because are we really going anywhere given COVID-19 and the uncertainty. You can put this down to your new superintendent, but I asked Chris to put it together just in case, because some of these come up, and I think by board policy we have to have these trips notified by October. Some of them extend well into the school year, which depending on the success of the team and the current practices in place for health, you may be able to go. So it's with that I asked Chris to put it together. So some of them may seem, really, we're thinking about going somewhere in November, but I asked them to put them together anyway. I'd rather sort of see it.
Okay. Board questions, or Chris, do you have anything?
Just some background. So the only trips being presented tonight are the ones that involve students who would qualify for New England or a national or state open championship based on their regular season performance. This is with the understanding that these events will still be taking place, obviously with COVID-19 it's still unknown. These are all also contingent on the district being in the past that involve a preseason or regular season trips. We're foregoing for the 2021 school year, so those are not on this proposed list tonight. These are just the possibility of kids qualifying based on a regular season performance. We would potentially be sending kids to these overnight trips. Again, contingent on the events taking place and the district being a place where we'd be willing to send them overnight to some of these events.
Board comments or questions? Mr. Burke.
Thanks for the list, Chris. Understanding that this is very hypothetical, the list itself is based on equity, I imagine, and no other factor than that. It's equal to all teams. It's based on the available tournaments, et cetera.
Correct. It's based on where sites are being held. You know, some of these national New England events are held locally, which wouldn't necessitate an overnight trip, which is why you wouldn't see it on this list tonight.
Thank you.
Chris, I'm sorry, Mrs. McCann.
Yeah, I think this is really for Alan. Alan, can you just clarify from a process perspective? So this basically is just a first read tonight so that we're familiar with them. And then what are you thinking just in terms of next steps, you know, again, given that.
Yeah, it is on for, yes, it's on for possible action. I just want to make sure, and again, as Chris said, there's not any additional trips here. It's just the ones that I'm just trying to make sure I meet the board policy, which is before October to have these trips potentially notified should the climate let us do it, and should the success of the teams let us do it. So to me, it would be like a provisional approval given the current health conditions and the state of the state, essentially state of the country, and also the success of the team. So the major thing being here, what's the status of COVID-19, and will we be going anywhere? So it's really it's a contingency approval, really, as opposed to coming back after October.
Mr. Manfredonia, are there any new trips here that we haven't seen before? My memory's failing me on one.
There's some of the sailing trips
yeah.
you haven't seen before in the past. You know, we're anticipating having a very successful sailing team, and with that said, there's the potential and the possibility that they would qualify for some of these really long distance events. And so as a safeguard, we put those on tonight's agenda where we haven't in the past.
So sailing is what jumped out at me. And I am hopeful for that team and for their success. The application, and maybe because it's the first time the coach has done this, it's very vague on funding and timing. Is that information just not available yet to the coach?
It is unavailable. You know, a lot of those events take place in May. So the dates aren't set yet. Number of nights aren't set yet. The actual, you know, if it happens on a Saturday or Sunday isn't set yet. So this is just a best guess estimate as to when those events will be taking place.
Okay, and so when it says precise explanation of sources of funding as it will be apportioned to students, district grants, I just see athletic budget and family. Do you have any? Clearly,
Right,
I understand the families will pick up.
In keeping with the guidelines, the district would pick up the entry fees, and the families would be responsible for covering of transportation, hotels, and meals.
And there's 2 sailing trips in here now, correct?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
2 sailing trips in here now?
There are actually potentially 4 sailing trips next spring.
Sorry, maybe what I was seeing is only 2 look like they possibly could affect school timing.
Correct.
Okay.
2 are longer distance.
I was a little worried that we might have 4 affecting school. There are only 2 that affected.
Potentially 2, and those are really high-end races. We're hopeful our students would qualify for. We haven't my understanding is not in a very long time, but there's a potential for next year for that to occur.
Okay, any other board questions? Mrs. Ritchie.
So just to be clear, there's no way we could delay this potential vote. I mean, I would love for our kids to be able to travel on these trips, but at this point there is a lot of uncertainty. So I guess if we have to do it now, I guess we'll vote on it, but is there any way that we can wait until we have more information and as we get closer to the start of school as to if these trips are actually going to happen? Are they safe? Or do we have to vote on this tonight?
Well, I can just talk from my perspective. I'm just trying to meet the guideline of the notification for October. I can assure you that the superintendent's not going to do anything silly with this in terms of traveling, but at the same time, you can certainly consider deferring it, or otherwise you've seen it, you've heard it. I just wanted it to be in for October so that it's not a surprise after October. So should the board want to do something, but.
So my only concern, and I shared Mrs. Ritchie's concern when this came up as an item, although this is, part of the regular timing for it, is that Dr. Adley and Mr. Manfredonia, you would need to stress with the coaches that this is a conditional approval. I think we'd all like to send our kids. We're just worried about getting our kids to school, so that what I don't want is any money has to be put out if any people are planning or booking their flights, and then all of a sudden the Board of Education does not approve this trip because of something related to COVID. I don't want our kids disappointed. I know, especially having kids, they so want their athletic seasons to happen. I'm sure they want their trip. So that conditionality needs to be stressed, because I just want to set everyone's expectations.
Most of them are probably, in most of the cases, they're probably not going to happen if the sport doesn't happen, which would be an indication of the health and safety. Just something.
Yeah.
I think as a district, we would have the autonomy to say, we're not sending our kids overnight trips. We in the spring at one point we said we made the decision before we shut down schools. We were not sending our kids out of state, so we were canceling some of our out of state spring contests that we had scheduled. So, I think the administration would retain that autonomy to say we're not sending kids given the circumstances of where we're at potentially.
Okay, that would be my only point, just so we stress the conditionality of it to set everyone's expectations. Although I think we very much hope all of our kids can have these experiences. Any other board comments or questions? Okay, so with that big conditionality attached to it, can I entertain a motion to approve the proposed athletic field trips, given that the environment allows for such at the time of the trip? Mr. Burke and Mr. Sini, all in favor? And that is, I just can't see it. Oh, there he is. That is unanimous, Mrs. Ritchie. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Manfredonia. And
Thank you.
Best of luck.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher.
We'll move on to discussion and possible approval of resuming normal board meetings and policy practices. Mr. Maroney has asked about this several times, so I don't know, Dennis, if you'd like to lead off. You can't speak.
Mr. Sandberg, can you hear me? Can you unmute down for me?
Oh, we had you and then we lost you.
Unmute.
No,
There you go.
we're good.
Okay, sorry, I wasn't allowed to unmute. No, I think it's about time we try to meet in person. I think we can do that in a safe and socially distant manner. If we wear masks or whatever we have to do. I think it's time to begin to start living our lives back to normalcy at some point. So I'm just a proponent of trying to take a step back to normalcy.
Thoughts, comments, questions, Mrs. Stein?
As much as I would love to be back in a room with all of you, I just, how do we do it safely, social distancing, with it being able to be televised? You know, what are the guidelines? I mean, I don't know about most of you who are working, but everyone I know is still working remotely for the most part, at least through part of July. I'm happy to do it if we can do it safely, and you know, the administration thinks we have a way to do it. But, you know, I think I'm sort of torn on why the rush when most major corporations are not having people go into the office.
Any other board comments or questions? Mr. Burke. Sorry, I saw Mrs. McCammon's hand and then she disappeared into the grass. So let me go to Mrs. McCammon and then Mr. Burke.
Thank you. Sorry about the grass. I think that there's a couple things embedded in this motion. It's partly going back to normal meetings. It's also just resuming our normal policies. I think that we could go back to a normal policy structure and evaluate whether or not we're comfortable having in-person meetings. I think they're not, I think we could agree to attempt to go back to normal, but kind of like the field trips, that there's a level of provisionality. But right now, the way we're structured, we have changed our policies and our meeting practices. And I think I agree with, I believe it's time for us to go back to a traditional policy structure and as much of a traditional meeting structure as we think is appropriate for the time. And we can evaluate that as we need going forward.
Mr. Burke.
I share Mrs. Stein's ambivalence. I would love to get back to 35 Leroy as soon as possible. I want to have it demonstrated to me that it is safe for us and safe for our guests before I'm willing to commit to doing so.
Anyone else thoughts? Mr. Brown and then Mr. Sini?
I just would agree that this is two issues. One is just regular practice and regular order. As for the meetings, as our chair knows, I've been pushing for remote access or something along those lines long before the crisis. So I'm not in a rush to get back, and would think the board could consider perhaps this becomes part of our standard meeting when people are traveling or other things go on, to try and keep everyone present, if virtually, in the future. Thank you.
Mr. Sini.
Yeah, I just echo Mr. Brown's comments. I think they're two totally distinct issues. And I'd actually asked Dr. Adley if there's any reason to have the emergency powers in his view at this point, given how well we've met virtually and now in an interactive format.
Mr. Sweeney, can you just repeat what you said about the emergency powers, please?
Yeah, is there any reason that you feel the need to retain those emergency powers over the summer, Dr. Adley?
Not unless I don't know what I don't know. I think we can come together and meet if we have to meet. You know, the fall's going to be uncertain, but that, you know, we can work around things. That's fine. We can work around things.
Mrs. Ritchie, do I see your hand?
I was going to ask Dr. Adley the same question as Mr. Sini. I just want to make sure that given that we're not meeting again for a couple of weeks, that if there's people that aren't around, or maybe we can now meet Zoom no matter where people are. So as long as Dr. Adley is comfortable with the transition back to our policy, then I would support that, but I want to make sure that Dr. Adley is confident that that's the path that we should go with at this point.
Well, I would just put a qualifier in there, right? As soon as Thursday comes along and you get what the requirements are and what you have to do and so on and so forth, then that may kick into gear some decision making. But the flexibility is good, but it's not to say that we can't pull people together if we need to pull them together.
So I'll tell you that I agree that these are two separate issues here, because people they kind of came together often when people brought it up. I think we can make a decision on our policy. I think, and I think when people are saying policy practices, what they mean is the emergency powers extended to the superintendent. And we all knew at some point we'd be going back to that. I appreciate that. I think we've had great attendance at these Zoom meetings. And so I leave that up to the board. I think we need to make that decision. As for meetings, I will tell you, I personally think it's a bit premature, because we typically have 14 to 15 people at least at our meetings. I also think that we have very well attended meetings. I think we have found a great way now to include real-time public comment. And so I actually think right now we're probably having a better meeting than if we had to limit public attendance in our meetings and people had to schedule whether they could come in or whether they had to go back to emailing. I think if we had to socially distance 14 people, we'd probably be looking for a different site than 35 Leroy. So I think the practicality of that, to me, I would maybe look a little bit more in the summer with phase 2 and phase 3. I would also just point out that we have a provision that expressly prohibits executive session from happening unless people are in the room. Under our current understanding and executive order, we have lightened that provision. So we have an executive session coming up this Saturday. Everyone would need to be present in the room if we say we're going back to regular meeting policies. I know some of that's not possible for you all. So I'm a little hesitant rushing the meeting part, because I think in this environment, it's proven to be conducive and still allow for the public to be part of us. And I think we've done everything we can to do that. Going to Zoom and allowing public comment in real time was a great success last weekend, or last meeting. So that's my only concern with the meeting. Trust me, I would love nothing more than to have you all here. It would be much easier, and I could actually stare at real people rather than staring at this little tiny camera. So I am for it. I personally think the meeting is premature, and I would hold off on that part, but I'm open to the board if they want to return to kind of regular working policies and removal of the emergency powers of the superintendent, short of a new emergency emerging. Mr. Deneen, and then I see Mrs. Ritchie.
I agree with your comments, Tara, about the meeting and the two separate items. The one thing you did mention, and just something to put on the list as we go forward, is, you know, the meetings in the summer generally are less attended, but when we go back to the school year, if we still have social distancing, we should think that we may need a different venue to hold our meetings to do the right social distancing. And then we would also be competing with a lot of other boards in town that will probably also be trying to do the same thing. It's just a thought, since a lot of board meetings overlap with our board meeting.
Yeah, no, trust me, I am with you on that thought and planning, because I love that we have so many members of the public attending. It's the one time that being a well-attended meeting is working to our disadvantage, but maybe doing it over Zoom allows everyone to listen in and have a voice. Any other thought? I'm sorry, I saw Mrs. Ritchie and then Mrs. McCammon.
Just for clarification, we gave the superintendent these temporary powers, but under our policy and under state statute, he does have authority for emergency situations to make financial decisions. So I think as long as Dr. Adley is comfortable with going back to the permanent powers that we have in our policy and under the state statute, I'm fine going ahead and revoking those powers.
Okay, Mrs. McCammon.
Thank you for that point, Deb. That's helpful in the whole conversation. I thought that that really what we were doing is using the governor's executive order to meet remotely, and that's sort of what set up the structure. I think that if we want to continue this going forward, we may need to look at our own policy, if I'm not mistaken, and make sure that we build in our own local pathways for what is most effective for our environment.
We do. Executive session is a particular carve out in that for what we have experienced, like, you know, people walking through Zoom meetings in our homes, and executive session is quite prohibited. It's allowable in this environment. The executive order expires, I believe, September 9th. So we have a little bit of time to prepare for it. I'm not sure we'll be able to carve out the exception for executive session with my current understanding of state statutes and laws, but I will look into it because I do understand that everyone wants to participate, but as we've all seen, I think Mr. Brown called that one meeting. He's like, I think we have someone extra in our meeting right now. And it was just someone walking through, but that's what we all need to, that's the hard part about executive session remotely if we are not working under the executive order at the moment. So it sounds as if there is a motion to be made to go back to the normal policies of the Board of Education. That does not, but to allow meetings to continue to happen under the governor's executive order, which is.
Well, I'm sorry, Tara. I made them two separate motions.
Sure, we can do it separately.
I just made the one motion to approve the resumption of in-person Board of Education meetings. And then the second motion was to approve the removal of the temporary powers granted to Dr. Adley related to COVID-19. So I'm open to suggestions.
Deb, if you want to move the first one, now remember, if there's not a second, we don't need to vote on it. So
okay.
Deb, move the first one.
So I'll move the motion to approve the resumption of in-person Board of Education meetings.
Is there a second? Okay, seeing none, there's no motion, nothing carries there. So Deb, you want to make the second motion?
So the second motion is to approve the removal of the temporary powers granted to Dr. Adley related to COVID-19.
So is there a second on that motion? Mr. Deneen so moves. All in favor? And that is unanimous. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Adley, for taking on that extra responsibility.
Well, thank you.
Well, it's
thank you for taking it back. Okay.
It's a lot of weight, but I think if Dr. Adley may editorialize for one moment, if Dr. Adley proved anything, he handled that situation incredibly well, as if we knew he would, in the best interest of the district. And God forbid we found ourselves in that situation again, we would have full faith in his operating ability.
Thank you. Thank you.
Here, here.
Thank you.
With that, we'll move on to action items. Mrs. Sion.
So in addition to the names that I listed on the personnel action report, we're asking you tonight to appoint Dana Giannattasio as the permanent assistant principal at Middlesex. Dana served this year as the interim assistant principal, filling in for Garen Mullen, who went to Royal as the principal. Prior to this year, she taught science at the middle school for 3 years, and before that was a high school biology teacher in Milton, Massachusetts. We're also asking you to approve Colleen Thompson as our new choral director, as our new director of music, replacing Rick Sadlon. Colleen is currently the high school choral director at Simsbury High School, where she served for the past 7 years. Before that, she spent 5 years at Simsbury Middle School. And before that, she was choral directors in West Hartford, Georgia, and Ohio. Colleen also was named this year the Choir Director of the Year by the Connecticut chapter of the American Choral Directors Association.
No, I think we've got two terrific candidates. I see Dana on here. I think Dana's on there. Congratulations, Dana. It was well deserved. It's never an easy position to come out of the teaching profession, right into your school, into an administrative position. And she's been well respected in all the good work that she's done, and also as a valuable member of the administrative team this year. And Colleen, I'm thrilled to have Colleen to join us and take over the rich traditions that Rick has put in place. And I'm excited about both, and they're wonderful additions to the district. It's nice to see that we can grow our own, and it's also nice to see that we can complement from outside. So congratulations to both, assuming we go through the motion here of approval.
All right. May I have a motion to approve the PAR dated June 23rd, 2020? Mrs. Stein so moves, Mr. Burke seconds, all in favor? That is unanimous. A big congratulations and welcome to the district for Ms. Thompson and Ms. Giannatasio, thank you, and welcome to officially your new position. And for everyone else who is listed on this PAR, a combination of welcome to the district and good luck on your retirements. So we thank you all for that. Is there any public comment this evening?
I see no hands up, so no comment.
We'll give that one moment, just because I know it's hard to find that button. All right. Seeing none, may I entertain a motion to adjourn? Mr. Sini so moves, and as does Mr. Maroney. All in favor? And that is unanimous. Thank you, everybody. Please have a good night.
Thank you very much. Thank you.